Sarah, when people drive by your house today, they see this beautiful, award-winning home. But I want to take our listeners back to that moment when you were 8 months pregnant, standing in a dumpster at 2 a.m., digging through actual garbage. What was going through your mind?
Tony, I remember looking down at my belly, talking to my unborn daughter, saying, "Baby girl, Mama's either about to build us a castle or completely lose her mind." I had $17 to my name, everyone calling me delusional, and I'm pulling out broken cabinet doors thinking, this could be our front porch. People thought I'd lost it. Maybe I had. But desperation has this funny way of making you see treasure where others see trash.
But here's what I'm dying to know. How does someone go from dumpster diving to changing an entire community?
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
Sarah, I want to take our listeners back to the very beginning. Before the house, before everything changed. Paint me a picture of where you were living when you first got this wild idea to build from scratch.
Tony, I was renting this tiny apartment above Mrs. Chen's grocery store on Maple Street. You know those places where the floorboards creak so loud you think they're going to give way? The whole building smelled like soy sauce and cigarettes, and my bathroom window looked directly into the alley where the dumpsters lived.
That doesn't sound like the most inspiring environment for dreaming big.
Laugh softly, you'd think so, but actually it was perfect. I spent hours at that bathroom window, 8 months pregnant, watching people throw away the most incredible things. Wooden crates that just needed a good sanding, perfectly good windows with tiny cracks. I remember thinking, here I am worried about affording a crib, and there's enough thrown away wood down there to build 10 cribs.
So the idea literally came from looking out your window?
The seed of it, yes. But Tony, you have to understand where my head was at that time. I was working 2 jobs, pregnant, and my landlord had just told me the rent was going up 40%. 40%. I was already choosing between groceries and prenatal vitamins.
Walk me through a typical day back then. What did your world look like?
I'd wake up at 5 in the morning to the sound of delivery trucks backing up in the alley. My shift at the diner started at 6, and let me tell you, being 8 months pregnant and carrying plates of Eggs Benedict is its own special kind of torture. The smell of bacon grease would hit me the moment I walked in, and I'd spend the first hour fighting morning sickness.
How were the regular customers treating you?
Most were kind, Tony. There was this one gentleman, Mr. Rodriguez, who came in every Tuesday for coffee and wheat toast. He'd always ask how I was feeling, leave an extra $1 tip. But then you had others who'd look at my belly, look at my ringless finger, and I could see their judgment written all over their faces.
That must have been difficult.
It was the whispers that got to me. I'd be refilling someone's coffee and hear bits of conversation about how young mothers these days don't plan properly, how the system enables poor choices. They had no idea I had a master's degree in environmental science, or that I'd been laid off when the research facility downsized.
You mentioned 2 jobs. What was the second one?
Evening shift at the recycling center. Now that job, Tony, that job opened my eyes. You cannot imagine what people throw away. I'd see perfectly good lumber, sheets of metal roofing, even bags of unused nails and screws. The manager, Dave, used to joke that Americans throw away enough building materials to construct a small city every week.
Is that where you started collecting materials?
Not officially. Pause. Dave had this policy about employees taking anything home, but he also had this way of being very busy in his office when I was loading my car with things destined for the landfill. Good man, that Dave. He understood what I was trying to do before I even understood it myself.
Tell me about the moment the idea crystallized. When did building a house stop being a fantasy and start being a plan?
It was a Thursday night in October. I remember because it was the first really cold night of the season, and my apartment had terrible heating. The radiator in my bedroom sounded like someone was inside it with a hammer, but the landlord said it was character, not a problem.
Chuckles character.
Right? So I'm lying in bed, shivering, with my hand on my belly feeling the baby kick, and I realized I was about to bring a child into this world with no real home to offer. That apartment was just a place I paid money to exist in. It wasn't ours. It wasn't stable. It wasn't anything I could count on.
What happened next?
I got up and made a list. Not a grocery list or a to-do list, but a real plan. I wrote down every single thing I'd seen thrown away that week that could be used for construction. I estimated square footage based on materials I knew I could realistically collect. I drew floor plans on the back of a pizza box.
Did you have any construction experience at all?
Tony, I'd never built anything more complicated than a bookshelf from a kit. But I had something more valuable than experience. I had desperation mixed with hope, and that's a powerful combination. Plus, my father had been a carpenter before he passed, and I still had all his tools gathering dust in storage.
What were people saying when you started talking about this plan?
Sighs, oh, Tony. My mother was the first to tell me I'd lost my mind. She kept saying, honey, you're about to have a baby. This is not the time for home improvement projects. My sister was convinced it was pregnancy hormones making me delusional.
What about friends, co-workers?
The girls at the diner thought it was sweet but impossible. They'd pat my shoulder and suggest I look into housing assistance programs instead. At the recycling center, the guys were split. Half thought I was crazy, half thought I was onto something interesting but way too ambitious.
Did anyone support the idea?
Dave did, quietly. He never said much, but he started setting aside particularly good pieces for me. And there was this woman, Anna, who came into the diner every Sunday after church. She was probably in her 70s. Always ordered decaf coffee and apple pie. When I told her what I was planning, her eyes lit up like Christmas morning.
What did Anna say?
She told me her grandfather had built their family farmhouse entirely from materials he found, or bartered for, during the Depression. She said the house was still standing, still beautiful, and still home to 3 generations of her family. Then she looked me right in the eye and said, Sarah, people who've never been desperate don't understand what desperate people can accomplish.
That must have meant a lot. Where were you planning to build? Did you have land? Sounds like it was exactly what you needed.
Exactly. It was 3/4 of an acre, mostly flat, with good drainage. The neighbors were spread enough that they wouldn't complain about construction noise. And Tony, the first time I stood on that land with my hand on my belly, I knew we were home.
What did the land look like when you first saw it with builder's eyes?
Wild. Completely wild. There were blackberry bushes everywhere, old fence posts from some long-gone boundary line, and this massive oak tree right in the center that I knew immediately would be part of the design. The ground was solid, no major rocks or roots where I wanted to build.
How did you handle the practical concerns? Permits, utilities, that sort of thing?
I spent weeks at the county office, Tony, weeks. I learned more about building codes and zoning laws than I ever wanted to know. The permit officer, this older gentleman named Frank, was patient with all my questions. I think he was curious to see if I'd actually follow through.
Were there legal obstacles?
Some. The county required certain inspections, proper electrical and plumbing work. I couldn't do those parts myself, obviously. But Frank explained that as long as the structure met safety codes, it didn't matter what materials I used or where they came from.
That must have been encouraging.
It was the green light I needed. I left that office with a folder full of paperwork and a building permit that cost me 3 weeks of grocery money, but I had official permission to build my dream.
Take me back to those last few weeks before you started construction. What was going through your mind?
Terror, mostly. Laughs. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning wondering what I'd gotten myself into. Here I was, about to have a baby, planning to build a house out of garbage. When you say it out loud like that, it sounds completely insane.
But you didn't stop.
I couldn't stop, Tony. Every time doubt crept in, I'd think about that radiator banging in the middle of the night or the way my landlord looked at me when I asked about repairs. I'd think about bringing my baby home to that little apartment that smelled like other people's cooking and sounded like other people's lives.
What kept you motivated during those moments of doubt?
The vision. I could see it so clearly, Tony. A small house with big windows, built-in shelves made from reclaimed wood, a kitchen where my child could do homework while I cooked dinner. I could picture us painting walls together, planting a garden, having birthday parties in our own backyard.
That's a powerful vision.
It was everything I'd never had growing up. We moved constantly when I was young, always renting, always temporary. I wanted my child to have roots, to have a place that was truly ours. And I knew that if I could build it myself, no one could ever take it away from us.
Looking back now, do you think you understood how big this undertaking really was?
Long pause. No, absolutely not. If I'd truly understood what I was about to attempt, I probably would have talked myself out of it. Sometimes ignorance is a gift, Tony. Sometimes not knowing how hard something is going to be is the only thing that lets you start.
Sarah, I want to take our listeners back to the very beginning, before the building started, before the viral videos. Tell me about that moment when you first looked at that empty lot and thought, this is where I'm going to build my home.
Long pause. Tony, it wasn't some grand revelation like people imagine. I was standing there in January, snow up to my ankles, 8 months pregnant, and so broke I couldn't afford a security deposit anywhere. The lot was just this ugly patch of frozen ground behind Mrs. Chen's grocery store. Broken bottles, old tires, weeds poking through the ice. But you know what I smelled? Possibility. And desperation has a way of making possibilities look like promises.
You mentioned Mrs. Chen. She became quite important to your story, didn't she?
Oh, that woman. Chuckles, 67 years old. 4 feet 11 inches of pure steel wrapped in floral aprons. She'd been watching me come into her store for weeks, counting out food stamps, my belly getting bigger, my face getting thinner. One day she just marched me outside and pointed to that lot. Said her late husband bought it 40 years ago, planning to expand the store. But life had other ideas.
And she just offered it to you.
Not offered, Tony. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You build something real there, something that lasts, and we'll figure out the paperwork later." Then she handed me a thermos of soup and told me to stop looking so pitiful. Mrs. Chen doesn't do pity, but she recognizes fight when she sees it.
What did that lot look like in those early days? Paint the picture for us.
Takes a breath. Picture the place where hope goes to die. The city had been using it as an unofficial dump for years. I found refrigerators with doors hanging open like hungry mouths, mattresses so waterlogged they'd grown their own ecosystems. There was this old washing machine turned on its side, and every morning I'd find it filled with fresh rainwater. Birds would come drink from it. That's when I started thinking differently about trash.
How so?
That washing machine wasn't broken, Tony. It was just serving a different purpose than what someone intended. Same with those refrigerators. Strip out the insulation and you've got perfectly good metal shelving. Those soggy mattresses? The springs inside were worth their weight in gold for reinforcement. I started seeing the lot not as a dumping ground, but as a hardware store that just needed better organization.
But you weren't alone in this vision, were you? Tell me about the other people who started gathering around the project.
Laugh softly. Marcus was the first. Sweet 16-year-old kid from down the block who should have been worried about homework and girls, but instead, he showed up every day after school asking what he could do. His grandmother raised him after his parents died, and I think he understood something about making do with what you have.
What drew him to help you?
Marcus told me later that watching me sort through garbage piles while pregnant reminded him of his grandmother during Hurricane Katrina. She rebuilt their whole life from nothing, literally picking through the wreckage of their old house to save what could be saved. He said I had the same look in my eyes she did. Stubborn hope, he called it.
And there were others?
Father Miguel from St. Anthony's started bringing youth groups by to help sort materials. At first I thought it was some kind of charity project, come help the poor pregnant lady feel useful. But Father Miguel, he saw something else. He'd grown up in El Salvador, watched his own father build their family home brick by brick, board by board, over 7 years. He understood that building with your hands builds more than just walls.
What did it build?
Community, Tony. Purpose. Those kids would show up arguing and sullen, but put them to work pulling nails out of old boards, sorting screws by size, and something shifted. They started talking to each other, really talking, about their dreams, their fears, their ideas for what the house could become. That pile of trash became a meeting place before it ever became a foundation.
I imagine not everyone in the neighborhood was supportive.
Pause. The Henderson family lived 3 houses down, and they made their feelings known from day one. Called the city every week, complaining about property values, health hazards, the whole 9 yards. Mrs. Henderson would walk by with her little dog and make these comments just loud enough for me to hear. Some people have no shame. Or this is what happens when standards disappear.
How did you handle that criticism?
At first it stung, Tony. I'd go home to my tiny studio apartment and cry. But then I'd wake up the next morning and feel this baby moving inside me and I'd think, she's going to need to see her mother fight for something. So I kept showing up. And you know what's funny? Mr. Henderson started slipping me useful things. Never directly, never where his wife could see, but I'd find a perfectly good window frame leaning against my pile, or a box of unused electrical supplies.
He was helping secretly?
Men like Mr. Henderson, they've been taught that certain things are impossible, that certain people don't deserve certain chances. But they also recognize good work when they see it. And despite what his wife was saying, despite what his neighbors were whispering, he could see that what I was building was solid. Every board level, every corner square. Desperation might have driven me to that lot, but craftsmanship was going to get me off it.
Where did you learn those building skills?
My grandfather, Tony. He could fix anything with duct tape, prayer, and whatever he found in his garage. used to tell me that knowing how things work is the only real security in this world. He'd been gone 15 years by then, but I could feel his hands guiding mine when I picked up that hammer. Could hear his voice explaining how to read the grain in a piece of wood, how to tell if a foundation is true.
It sounds like this project was connecting you to more than just building materials.
Voice softening. It was connecting me to everyone who'd ever had to make something from nothing. Every person who'd ever been told they couldn't, shouldn't, wouldn't. When I'd get tired or discouraged, I'd think about all the hands that had touched these materials before me. The carpenter who originally cut this beam, the family who'd gathered around this kitchen table, the child who'd grown up in the bedroom where this window used to let in morning light.
That's a beautiful way to think about recycled materials.
Nothing's really trash, Tony. It's just waiting for someone who can see its next purpose. And maybe that's true for people too.
Sarah, I want to take our listeners back to the very beginning, before the building even started. What was your living situation like when you first got this idea to build a house from scratch?
Tony, I was renting this tiny apartment above Mrs. Chen's grocery store downtown. The ceiling leaked every time it rained, and there were mice that had basically become my roommates. I was paying $800 a month for what was essentially a glorified closet, and with the baby coming, I knew I couldn't stay there much longer.
8 months pregnant and dealing with those conditions. That must have been incredibly stressful.
The stress was eating me alive. I remember lying awake at night, feeling the baby kick, and just staring at that water stain on the ceiling that kept getting bigger. I'd calculate my savings over and over, trying to figure out how I could afford a deposit on something better, but the numbers never worked. Every decent rental wanted first month, last month security deposit. I was looking at $3,000 just to move into a place that might not be much better.
So when did this idea of building your own place first enter your mind?
It sounds crazy now, but it happened at the city dump. I was there throwing away some old furniture that had gotten ruined in one of those ceiling leaks, and I saw this man loading up his truck with what looked like perfectly good lumber, just pulling it right out of the construction waste pile.
You struck up a conversation with him.
I did. His name was Frank, and he told me he'd been salvaging materials for 20 years. Built 3 sheds, a chicken coop, and even added a room onto his house, all from stuff people threw away. He looked at my belly and said something I'll never forget. He said, "Honey, people throw away enough good materials in this city every week to build a mansion. The only thing stopping most folks is they think they're too good for other people's trash."
That must have planted a seed. But surely the practical side of you was saying this was impossible.
Oh, absolutely. I knew nothing about construction. I'd never even hung a picture frame straight, but I also knew I was running out of options fast. I had maybe 2 months before the baby came, and after that, everything would be 10 times harder.
What did your family think when you first mentioned this idea?
Laughed softly. My sister Patricia thought I'd lost my mind completely. She kept saying, "Sarah, you can't build a house out of garbage while you're pregnant. What if you hurt yourself? What if you hurt the baby?" My mother was convinced it was just hormones making me think crazy thoughts.
And your friends?
Most of them tried to be supportive, but I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was having some kind of breakdown. My friend Janet actually suggested I see a therapist. She said, "Honey, this sounds like nesting instinct gone completely off the rails."
Were there moments when you wondered if they were right?
Every single day, Tony. I'd wake up in the morning feeling like maybe I could actually do this. And then by evening, I'd be overwhelmed just thinking about where to start. I remember standing in my little kitchen one night eating cereal for dinner because I was too tired to cook, and thinking, if you can barely manage making a real meal, how are you going to build an entire house?
But something kept pushing you forward.
I think it was desperation mixed with something else. Something I can only call faith, though I wasn't particularly religious at the time. I just had this feeling that if I didn't try this, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what if. And I couldn't bear the thought of raising my child in that apartment, or worse, bouncing from one bad rental to another.
Tell me about the moment you decided to actually start.
It was a Tuesday morning in October. I was walking past that construction site on my way to work, and I saw them throwing away this beautiful old door. Solid wood, just needed some paint and new hardware. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, watching the workers toss perfectly good materials into that dumpster, and something just clicked.
You asked if you could take some of it.
I marched right up to the foreman, this big guy with arms like tree trunks, and asked if I could have some of the stuff they were throwing away. He looked at my belly, looked at me like I was completely nuts, and said, "Lady, you want to dig through our trash and knock yourself out. Just don't hurt yourself and sue us."
That was your green light.
That was my green light. I called in sick to work that afternoon and spent 3 hours pulling materials out of that dumpster. Windows, trim pieces, cabinet doors, even some beautiful old tile. I filled up my entire car and had to make 2 trips home.
How did it feel, driving home with that first load? Little did you know that first load would eventually become something that would change not just your life, but your entire community.
Pause. If someone had told me that day what was coming, I would have thought they were crazier than everyone already thought I was.
Sarah, we've talked about those early struggles with the landlord and your growing desperation to find stable housing. But there was a specific moment, wasn't there, when everything changed, when the situation went from difficult to impossible?
Long pause. Oh, Tony. Yes, there was. It was a Tuesday morning in late February. I remember because I had a doctor's appointment that afternoon for my 32-week checkup. I was feeling hopeful, you know? I'd managed to scrape together another month's rent, and I thought maybe, just maybe, I could make it work until the baby came.
What happened that morning?
I was making breakfast for Emma and myself when I heard this heavy knock on the door. Not a normal knock, Tony, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even answer it.
The landlord?
Worse. It was the landlord, Mr. Henderson, but he wasn't alone. He had 2 men with him in uniform, code enforcement officers, and behind them I could see this woman with a clipboard and a camera.
What did they want?
Mr. Henderson didn't even look me in the eye. He just said, "Sarah, I'm sorry, but we have a problem. These gentlemen need to inspect the property." The woman with the clipboard, she introduced herself as being from Child Protective Services.
Oh my goodness. How did you react to that?
I felt like the floor disappeared under my feet, Tony. I'm standing there, 8 months pregnant, and the CPS worker is explaining that they received an anonymous complaint about the living conditions. She said someone reported that the apartment was unsafe for a child.
Anonymous complaint. Do you have any idea who might have made that call?
Bitter laugh. I had my suspicions. Mrs. Kowalski from downstairs had been giving me dirty looks ever since she found out I was pregnant. She'd made comments about unwed mothers and how some people shouldn't be allowed to have children. But I couldn't prove anything.
What did you tell them?
What could I say? I invited them in because I had nothing to hide. Yes, the apartment was small. Yes, the heater didn't work properly and we had that space heater running. Yes, there was some water damage in the bathroom ceiling that Mr. Henderson kept promising to fix. But it was clean, Tony. I kept that place spotless.
How did Emma handle seeing all these strangers in your home?
That's what broke my heart the most. My little girl just stood behind me, clutching my leg, not understanding why all these serious-looking people were in our kitchen taking pictures and writing things down. She kept asking me if we were in trouble.
What did the inspection reveal?
The code enforcement officers found violations I didn't even know existed. The electrical outlets in the bathroom weren't up to current standards. The space heater was a fire hazard. There was lead paint under the newer paint in Emma's bedroom. Things that had been grandfathered in for years suddenly became urgent safety issues.
And the CPS worker?
She was actually kind, Tony. I could see in her eyes that she didn't want to be there any more than I wanted her there, but she had to do her job. She explained that while the current conditions weren't immediately dangerous, they couldn't approve the home for a newborn without significant repairs.
What kind of timeline were you looking at for those repairs?
That's when Mr. Henderson finally spoke up. He said he couldn't afford to make the necessary improvements. The building was old, and bringing everything up to code would cost more than he could justify for the rental income. He gave me 30 days to find somewhere else to live.
30 days? You were 8 months pregnant with a toddler, and he gave you 30 days.
The CPS worker looked as shocked as I felt. She asked him if he understood my situation, and he just shrugged. He said it wasn't his responsibility to house every hard luck case in the city. Those were his exact words, Tony. Hard luck case.
How did that make you feel?
Angry doesn't even begin to cover it. Here I was, working 2 jobs, never missing rent, keeping my family together despite everything. And I'm reduced to a hard luck case. But underneath the anger was this terror because I knew what this meant.
What did it mean?
It meant that in 30 days, if I couldn't find appropriate housing that would pass a CPS inspection, Emma could be placed in temporary foster care. And when the baby was born, if I still didn't have suitable housing, they might not let me take him home from the hospital.
Did the CPS worker explain what would happen next?
She said they'd work with me, that their goal was to keep families together. but she also had to be honest about the reality. Safe, affordable housing that would meet their standards wasn't exactly abundant. She'd seen too many cases where temporary separations became permanent ones because parents couldn't navigate the system fast enough.
What was going through your mind as all these people finally left your apartment?
I remember sitting on my couch after they left, just staring at the eviction notice Mr. Henderson had handed me. Emma was asking if we were going to move again, and I didn't know what to tell her. I realized that everything I'd been fighting for, everything I'd been trying to build for my children, could disappear in 30 days.
That must have felt overwhelming.
Beyond overwhelming, Tony. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and someone had just cut the rope. I had no savings for a deposit on a new place. My credit was shot from all the financial struggles, and even if I could find somewhere affordable, how could I guarantee it would pass a CPS inspection?
So what did you do?
Pause. I did what I always did when everything fell apart. I put Emma down for her nap, and I sat at my kitchen table with a piece of paper and started making lists. But this time, Tony, I wasn't just planning how to survive the next month. I was planning something that would change everything.
Sarah, we've been talking about those early days when you were struggling to make ends meet, sleeping in your car, fighting to keep hope alive. But there's a moment when everything changed, isn't there? When the situation went from difficult to what most people would call impossible. Court date?
The eviction hearing. I'd been fighting it for 2 months, but that morning I had to sit in that sterile courtroom, 8 months pregnant, and listen to the judge tell me I had 30 days to vacate the little apartment I'd been renting.
30 days. And you were how far along at that point?
32 weeks. The baby was due in 8 weeks, Tony. 8 weeks. I remember sitting there feeling her kicking inside me like she knew something was wrong, and the judge is talking about property rights and missed payments like we were discussing the weather.
What was going through your mind in that moment?
Panic. Pure, ice-cold panic. I kept thinking, where do you take a newborn baby when you don't have a roof over your head? The women's shelter had a 6-month waiting list. My sister lived 3 states away in a 1-bedroom apartment with her own 2 kids, and my pride. God, my pride was still telling me I could figure this out on my own.
Did you try to explain your situation to the judge?
I stood up. I'll never forget it. My back was aching something fierce, and I struggled to get to my feet, and I said, Your Honor, I'm having a baby in 2 months. I just need a little more time to find something stable. And you know what he said to me?
What did he say?
He said, Ma'am, perhaps you should have considered your housing situation before your family planning decisions? The whole courtroom went silent. I felt my face burn red, and this mama bear rage just flooded through me.
How did you respond to that?
I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that this baby wasn't planned, that her father took off the minute he found out that I'd been working 60-hour weeks until my doctor put me on bed rest. But I just stood there, rubbing my belly, and said, Yes, sir, 30 days.
So you walked out of that courtroom with essentially no options.
That's what I thought. I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot for maybe an hour, just crying, big, ugly tears. And then my phone rang.
Who was calling?
My landlord, Mr. Peterson. But he wasn't calling to gloat or anything like that. He was calling because he felt terrible about what happened in court, and he wanted to help somehow.
That's when everything shifted.
He told me about this piece of land, 5 acres that his family owned out on the edge of town. Nothing on it but weeds and old foundation stones from a house that burned down in the 70s. He said if I could figure out how to put something livable on it, I could stay there rent-free until I got back on my feet.
What was your first reaction to that offer?
I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. I said, Mr. Peterson, I appreciate the kindness, but I'm 8 months pregnant and I have about $400 to my name. How exactly am I supposed to build anything?
And what did he say?
He said something that changed everything. He said, Sarah, I've watched you fight for 2 months to keep that little apartment. You've got more determination than most people I know. Maybe the question isn't whether you can build something. Maybe the question is what you're willing to build it from.
What did you think he meant by that?
I had no idea. But driving home that day, I started noticing things differently. Construction sites with dumpsters full of wood scraps. Appliance stores with refrigerator boxes stacked behind the building. People putting furniture out on the curb for trash pickup.
You started seeing possibility in what others considered waste.
Exactly. By the time I got home that night, I had this crazy idea forming. What if I could actually do this? What if I could build something from all the things people throw away? I mean, how hard could it be?
Chuckles' famous last words.
Oh, Tony, if I had known what I was getting myself into. But sometimes ignorance is a blessing, you know? Sometimes you have to be naive enough to attempt the impossible before wisdom talks you out of it.
So that was the moment. Sitting in your car after that court hearing, getting that phone call, driving home, and seeing trash as treasure.
That was the moment my old life ended and this adventure began.
Sarah, I have to ask about something that's been weighing on my mind as we talk. You're 8 months pregnant, essentially homeless, and you've just committed to building a house from garbage. How did the people closest to you react when you told them your plan?
Long pause. Well, Tony, that's where things got really complicated. My sister was the first person I called, and I'll never forget her exact words. She said, "Sarah, I love you, but this sounds like a complete mental breakdown."
That must have stung, coming from family.
It did, but I understood her fear. Here I was, this pregnant woman who'd already made what everyone considered poor life choices, and now I'm talking about building something out of trash. She begged me to come stay with her in Phoenix, said she'd help me get back on my feet after the baby came.
Did you consider taking her up on that offer?
Every single day for about 2 weeks. Pause. The practical part of my brain kept screaming that she was right, but something deeper kept pulling me back to those blueprints I'd sketched on napkins. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning with solutions to problems I hadn't even encountered yet.
It sounds like everyone was trying to rescue you from yourself.
Exactly. And the thing is, Tony, they weren't wrong to be concerned. I was a single mother with $17 in my checking account, living in a car, planning to build a house with no construction experience. On paper, it was absolutely insane.
But something kept you going despite all that concern.
There was this moment, about 3 weeks into collecting materials, when I found myself crying in the Home Depot parking lot. I'd gone in to ask about getting broken pallets, and the manager looked at me like I was diseased. A woman in the parking lot saw me crying and came over.
What did she say?
She didn't say anything at first, just handed me a $20 bill and said, "Whatever you're going through, it's temporary." But then she asked what I was building, and when I told her, her whole face changed. She got this look like she was seeing something I couldn't see yet.
How do you mean?
She said, "My grandmother built her first house during the Depression with nothing but scrap wood and determination. She raised 7 children in that house." Then she wrote her phone number on the back of a receipt and said, "Call me if you need help."
Did you call her?
Not right away. I was still too proud, too afraid of being judged. But that encounter planted something in me. It made me realize that maybe what looked like failure to some people might look like courage to others.
How did that shift in perspective affect your daily routine?
I started paying attention to different things. Instead of focusing on all the reasons it wouldn't work, I began documenting small victories. Like the day I figured out how to waterproof a section of roof using old tarps and industrial adhesive someone had thrown away.
Were you keeping a journal during this time?
Sort of. I was writing letters to the baby. Pause. I know that sounds silly, but I wanted to explain to my child why mommy was doing something so unconventional. I wanted them to understand that sometimes the safest path isn't actually safe at all.
What do you mean by that?
Well, taking charity, moving in with my sister, accepting that I was a victim of circumstances, that felt safe. But it also felt like giving up on the possibility that I could create something meaningful. I kept thinking about what kind of story I wanted to tell my child about where they came from.
So this was about more than just shelter.
Much more. It was about proving to myself, and eventually to my child, that when life strips everything away from you, you can still build something beautiful. Even if you have to build it from the pieces other people have thrown away.
That's a powerful legacy to want to leave, but I imagine the practical challenges were mounting every day.
Oh, they absolutely were. And we haven't even talked about the morning I woke up to find the city had posted a notice about unauthorized construction on the lot.
Sarah, I imagine those first few weeks of construction brought out reactions in people you hadn't expected. How did your neighbors start responding when they saw what you were actually doing?
Long pause. You know, Tony, that's when I learned who my real friends were. Mrs. Henderson next door, she'd been polite enough before, but suddenly she's calling the city every other day about property values and health hazards.
That must have been painful, having neighbors turn against you when you were already feeling so vulnerable.
It was crushing, honestly. Here I am, 8 months pregnant, trying to build something for my baby, and I'm getting these official notices taped to my door. But what really got to me was seeing how it affected my daughter Emma.
Tell me about Emma. How old was she at this point?
Just turned 7. Old enough to understand that people were saying mean things about her mama, but too young to understand why. She started asking me if we were bad people, Tony, if that's why everyone was angry at us.
Pause. How did you handle those conversations with her?
I'd sit her down every evening after we'd worked on the house, and I'd explain that sometimes people get scared when they see someone doing something different. I told her that Noah probably had neighbors complaining about his ark too.
You were already starting to see this as something bigger than just building a house.
I had to, or I would have quit. Every morning I'd wake up with this baby kicking inside me, reminding me I was running out of time, and I'd see Emma's little face trusting that Mama knew what she was doing. Pa's problem was, most days I didn't feel like I knew anything at all.
What kept you going during those moments of doubt?
The strangest thing, Tony. I'd be out there hammering away at some piece of reclaimed wood, feeling sorry for myself, and people would just appear. Not neighbors, mind you, but strangers who'd heard about what I was doing.
How were people hearing about your project?
Emma's teacher, Miss Rodriguez, had mentioned it to someone at church. Word travels fast in a small town, especially when it's about the crazy pregnant lady building a house out of garbage. Pause, but some of those people, they didn't come to gawk. They came to help.
Who was the first person to offer genuine help?
Old Jim Morrison. He must have been 75, this retired carpenter who showed up one Tuesday morning with his toolbox and a thermos of coffee. Didn't say much at first, just started reinforcing the foundation I'd been struggling with for weeks.
What did he tell you about why he came?
Voice softening. He said he'd been watching me from his truck for days, driving by on his way to the hardware store. Said it reminded him of when he built his first house back in 1962 with nothing but determination and materials other people didn't want.
That must have felt like a lifeline.
It was more than that, Tony. Jim started coming every Tuesday and Thursday. Pretty soon, his grandson Danny was showing up on weekends. Then Maria from the grocery store began saving cardboard and clean containers for me instead of throwing them out.
So you were building more than a house. You were building a community.
I didn't see it that way then. I was just grateful for every pair of hands, every small donation. But looking back, yes, we were creating something none of us had planned.
How did the criticism from other neighbors evolve as more people got involved?
Pause. It got louder before it got quieter. Some folks felt threatened, like we were making them look bad for not helping. Others worried we were attracting the wrong kind of attention to the neighborhood.
The wrong kind of attention?
Poor people. People who might get ideas about building their own unconventional homes. People who might not fit their picture of what the neighborhood should look like.
That must have stung, being seen as a threat to community standards. That's a profound recognition, Sarah. How did it change your perspective on the people who were criticizing you?
I started seeing their fear instead of just their anger. Fear that their property values would drop, fear that disorder would spread, fear that if someone like me could lose everything, so could they.
Did that understanding make it easier to deal with the opposition?
In some ways, yes, but it also made me more determined to prove that what we were building wasn't chaos or decline. It was hope, Tony. And hope, it turns out, can be just as contagious as fear.
Sarah, we've talked about the physical challenges of building with recycled materials, but I sense there's something deeper here. What was going through your mind during those long nights when doubt crept in?
Long pause. You know, Tony, there were moments when I'd sit in that half-finished shell of a house, my back aching, the baby kicking like she was trying to escape, and I'd wonder if everyone was right, if I was just a stubborn fool putting my child at risk.
Tell me about one of those nights specifically. What did that look like? What kept you from walking away? From accepting one of those offers for temporary housing?
My mother's voice, actually. She'd been gone for 3 years by then, but I could hear her as clear as I'm hearing you now. She used to tell me about the Depression, how her family survived by making something from nothing. She'd say, "Sarah, the world will tell you what you can't do, but only you decide what you can."
Your mother sounds like she was a strong influence. Did she face similar criticism when she was raising you?
Oh, absolutely. She was a single mother, too, back when that really meant something in a small town. Divorced in 1962 with 2 kids and no support. People whispered, you know, at church, at the grocery store. But she held her head high and made sure we never felt ashamed of our circumstances.
So this house wasn't just about having shelter. It was about proving something larger.
Voice softening. It was about legacy, Tony. What was I going to pass down to my daughter? The story of how I gave up when things got hard, or the story of how I built something with my own hands when the world said it couldn't be done? Slight laugh. Oh, they were the worst. I had this building inspector, Mr. Garrett, who showed up one morning in November. He walked around my foundation, taking notes, muttering under his breath. Finally, he looked at me and said, "Ma'am, I don't know what you think you're building here, but it's not a house."
How did you respond to that?
I was so tired, Tony. So bone-deep exhausted. I almost broke down right there. Instead, I asked him to define a house for me. He started rattling off codes and specifications, and I just listened. When he finished, I said, "Mr. Garrett, everything you just described is about materials and measurements. You didn't mention the part about it being a home."
Did that change his perspective at all?
Not immediately. But here's what's interesting. He kept coming back. Every week, sometimes twice a week, always with that clipboard, always with concerns. But I started to realize he wasn't trying to shut me down. He was genuinely worried about safety.
So the criticism was coming from a place of care, not malice. That must have been a turning point in how you viewed the opposition you were facing.
It was. I started asking myself why people were so invested in my failure. Some were genuinely concerned about safety. Others, I think, were uncomfortable with what my success might mean about their own limitations.
Explain that last part. What do you mean about their own limitations?
Think about it, Tony. If a broke, pregnant woman can build a house from trash, what excuse does anyone else have for not pursuing their dreams? My success forced people to confront their own fears about taking risks.
So you became a mirror for other people's regrets.
Exactly. I had this friend, Janet, who'd always talked about opening a bakery. She'd been saving money for 5 years, making excuses about timing. When she saw me laying tire foundations at 8 months pregnant, she got angry, really angry. Said I was being reckless and irresponsible.
But that anger wasn't really about you.
No, it was about her recognizing that fear, not circumstances, was holding her back. It took her a while to admit that, but she eventually did. And you know what? She opened that bakery 6 months after I moved into my house.
How did watching your journey affect her decision?
She told me later that if I could risk everything for my dream while pregnant and homeless, she could risk her savings on a business plan. My recklessness gave her permission to take a smaller, more calculated risk.
Looking back now, do you think you were being reckless?
Long pause. I think I was being desperate, and sometimes desperation looks like recklessness to people who have other options. But Tony, I didn't have other options. I could accept charity and remain dependent, or I could try to build something sustainable for my daughter and myself.
Did you ever worry about what would happen if you failed, not just to you, but to your unborn daughter?
Every single day. That fear lived in my chest like a constant ache. But then I'd think about the alternative, raising her in temporary housing, always one bureaucratic decision away from being displaced again. At least with my crazy plan, we'd own whatever I could build.
Ownership meant security, even if the structure was unconventional.
More than security, dignity. When you own something, even something strange and imperfect, you have agency. You make decisions about your environment instead of being subject to someone else's rules and timelines.
As winter approached, and you were getting closer to your due date, how did the pressure affect your work?
I became more focused, actually. Less worried about what people thought and more concerned with getting the basics finished. I needed walls that would hold heat, a roof that wouldn't leak, and a safe space for labor if the baby came early.
Were you planning to have the baby at home?
Not by choice, but I had to be prepared for that possibility. I was pre-registered at the hospital, but if a snowstorm hit or my old truck broke down, I needed a backup plan.
That level of uncertainty must have been terrifying.
It was, but it also clarified my priorities. I stopped caring about perfect corners and started focusing on functional shelter. Sometimes limitations force you to discover what really matters.
Looking at where you are now, how do you view that woman who was stuffing newspapers into tire walls?
Pause with profound respect, Tony. She was braver than I thought possible. She was building more than a house. She was building a new version of herself.
Sarah, we've talked about the physical challenges of building with salvaged materials, but I'm sensing there was something deeper happening during those weeks. What was going through your mind as you worked?
Long pause. You know, Tony, I'd wake up at 3 in the morning sometimes, my back aching, the baby kicking, and I'd lie there wondering if my mother had been right all along.
Your mother had opinions about this project?
Oh, she had opinions about everything I'd ever done. When I called to tell her I was pregnant and alone, she said I was making the same mistakes she'd made. When I told her about the house, she laughed. Actually laughed and said, "Sarah, you've finally lost your mind completely."
That must have been incredibly painful to hear.
It was. But it also lit something in me. I realized I'd been carrying her voice in my head for 32 years, and it had never once told me I was capable of anything good. Every piece of wood I salvaged, every wall I framed, I was building against that voice.
Was this the first time you'd really confronted those family patterns?
The first time I'd had the courage to build something instead of just running away from them. I'd spent my 20s moving from city to city, job to job, relationship to relationship. Always thought the problem was external. But when you're 8 months pregnant with nowhere to go, you can't run anymore.
So the house became more than shelter.
It became proof. Proof that I could finish something I started. Proof that I could create instead of just consume. My whole life, I'd been told I was the kind of person things happened to, not the kind who made things happen.
Tell me about a specific moment when you felt that shift.
Pause. There was this morning, maybe 3 weeks in, when I was trying to install a window I'd pulled from a demolition site. It was this beautiful old casement window, probably from the 1940s, still had the original hardware, but it was 3 inches too wide for the opening I'd framed.
What did you do?
The old Sarah would have cried, would have called someone to fix it, would have given up. But I sat there for an hour, really looking at that window, at the wall, thinking about solutions. Then I realized I could expand the opening, add some decorative trim I'd been saving. Turn the problem into a feature.
And when you made that work?
Tony, I felt like I could build the whole world if I needed to. It sounds silly, but holding my belly with one hand and fitting that window perfectly with the other, I thought about the baby growing inside me. I was literally building her first home with my own hands.
Did that change how you thought about becoming a mother?
Everything about those weeks changed how I thought about motherhood. I'd been terrified I'd repeat my mother's patterns, that I'd pass down her bitterness, her sense, that life was something that happened to you. But every day I worked on that house, I was proving that wasn't true.
Were there moments of doubt during this time?
Oh, constantly. Especially when neighbors started stopping by, some were curious, some were judgmental. This one woman, Mrs. Patterson from across the street, would walk her dog past my lot every morning and shake her head like she was watching a tragedy unfold.
How did you handle that kind of judgment?
At first, it bothered me. I'd catch myself explaining to anyone who'd listen that I had a plan, that I knew what I was doing. But eventually I realized their doubt said more about their own fears than about my capabilities. Most people spend their whole lives wanting to build something meaningful, but convincing themselves they can't. Watching someone actually do it with literal garbage forced them to confront their own excuses. Mrs. Patterson wasn't really worried about my house, Sarah. She was worried about what it meant that I was trying when she never had.
That's a profound insight. When did you start seeing your project in those broader terms?
When I stopped being defensive about it. When I realized that every person who said I'd never make it was really saying they'd never make it, and every person who stopped to encourage me was someone who still believed in their own possibilities.
So you were building more than a house from the very beginning.
I was building a new version of myself, and I didn't know it yet, but I was building a template for other people to do the same thing. That little house was becoming a mirror, Tony. People looked at it and saw either their fears or their dreams reflected back at them.
Sarah, we've talked about the building process, the community response, even the viral fame that followed. But I have a feeling there's something deeper here that we haven't touched on yet.
Long pause, you're perceptive, Tony. There is something I haven't shared with anyone publicly before.
Take your time. What is it that's been weighing on you?
The truth is, I wasn't actually homeless when I started building that house. I had a place to live.
I'm not sure I understand. You mean you had temporary housing?
No, Tony. I had a perfectly good apartment. 2 bedrooms, safe neighborhood, reasonable rent that I could afford with my job at the insurance office.
Then why? Sarah, help me understand why you put yourself through all of that.
Because I was dying inside that apartment. Not physically, but spiritually. I'd wake up every morning, go to work, come home, watch television, go to bed, repeat. I was 8 months pregnant, and I realized my child was going to be born into this beige, soulless existence.
So building the house was never about necessity in the traditional sense.
Exactly. It was about proving to myself, and maybe to my unborn daughter, that we could create something beautiful and meaningful with our own hands. That we didn't have to accept what the world handed us.
But Sarah, the media coverage, all those articles about the struggling single mother, you let people believe you were destitute.
I never explicitly said I was homeless, Tony. I said I needed a home. Those are very different things. The reporters made assumptions, and I didn't correct them.
How do you feel about that now, looking back?
Conflicted. On one hand, I feel guilty that people donated money and materials thinking I was in desperate financial straits. On the other hand, everything I built was real. The house was real. The community that formed around it was real. The inspiration people drew from it was real.
What about your neighbors who helped you? Did they know the truth?
Mrs. Chen figured it out pretty quickly when she saw me driving to my old apartment to pick up mail. She asked me directly, and I told her everything. You know what she said?
What did she say?
She said, "Honey, we're not helping you because you're poor. We're helping you because you're brave." That's when I realized that maybe my deception wasn't really deception at all. I was homeless, Tony. Not financially, not physically, but emotionally and spiritually. I was living in a place that wasn't a home. I was surrounded by things that meant nothing to me, in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else.
And building the house from discarded materials, what did that represent for you?
It represented taking all the broken, unwanted parts of myself and turning them into something whole. Every piece of salvaged wood was like a discarded dream I was reclaiming. Every recycled window was a new way of seeing my future.
Sarah, do you think you would have gotten the same community support if people had known you had an apartment?
Probably not the same level of urgency, no. But I think the deeper support, the people who really understood what I was doing, they would have helped regardless. Like Mrs. Chen, like old Mr. Rodriguez, who taught me about foundation work.
How did this revelation affect your relationship with your daughter as she grew up?
I've always been honest with her about it. She's 16 now, and she says it's one of the things she's most proud of about me. Not that I built a house, but that I refused to settle for a life that felt empty.
What would you say to critics who might argue that you misled people?
I'd say that sometimes the deepest truths can't be captured in simple facts. Yes, I had shelter, but I didn't have a home. Yes, I had income, but I didn't have purpose. The house I built wasn't just walls and a roof. It was a declaration that we all deserve to live deliberately, to create meaning with our own hands.
And the apartment you left behind?
I gave my landlord 2 months' notice and moved into the new house the day after my daughter was born. I've never looked back. Well, maybe I've looked back, but I've never regretted moving forward.
This changes everything about how I understood your story, Sarah.
Does it change it, Tony, or does it deepen it? Because for me, it was never about building a house. It was about building a life worth living.
Sarah, we've talked about the construction, the community support, the media attention, but I sense there's something deeper here that we haven't touched on yet.
Long pause, you're perceptive, Tony. There is something I haven't told anyone publicly before.
Take your time. What is it?
The real reason I started building that house. It wasn't just because I was desperate for shelter. 3 days before I found that first pile of discarded lumber, I received an eviction notice.
I thought you said you were living in your car already.
That's what I let people believe. The truth is, I was staying in a condemned building downtown. Squatting, really. With my daughter Emma.
Emma? Sarah, you never mentioned having another child. Where is Emma now?
That's the thing, Tony. 2 weeks before I started building, Children's Services found us in that condemned building. They took her.
Oh my God.
They said I was an unfit mother. Said I couldn't provide a stable home. The caseworker told me if I could prove I had permanent housing within 90 days, they'd consider returning her.
So when you were building that house, 8 months pregnant.
I was racing against time to get my daughter back. Every nail I hammered, every piece of trash I turned into something useful, it was all for Emma. The baby I was carrying gave me hope for the future, but Emma was my heart walking around outside my body.
Did the community know this?
No. I was too ashamed. Here I was, this symbol of resourcefulness and determination, but I'd failed at the most basic thing a mother should do: keep her child safe.
Sarah, that changes everything about your story. Every scene you've described.
When people saw me building alone, they thought I was some kind of pioneer woman. Really, I was just a broken mother trying to prove I deserved to have my family back.
Did you get her back?
Pause. That's tomorrow's conversation, Tony. Some truths need their own space to breathe.
Sarah, we're approaching what sounds like the most crucial moment in your entire journey. The house was nearly finished, you were about to give birth, and the county inspector was coming for the final review. How were you feeling in those last few days?
Deep breath, Tony. I'd never experienced anything quite like it. One moment I'd feel this incredible surge of confidence, looking at what I'd built with my own hands, and the next I'd be terrified that everything could come crashing down.
What was going through your mind as you prepared for that final inspection?
I kept walking through every room, touching the walls I'd constructed from those reclaimed materials, checking every joint twice. My baby was kicking constantly, as if sensing my anxiety. I remember thinking, what if they see something I missed? What if all this work was for nothing?
Did you have any support during those final preparations?
The neighbors who'd initially called me crazy started showing up. Mrs. Henderson brought me herbal tea for my nerves. Old Mr. Garcia offered to help me organize my permit paperwork. It was like the whole community suddenly understood what I was really trying to accomplish.
That must have been overwhelming, having that support after feeling so alone.
Pause. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. I realized I wasn't just building a house anymore, Tony. I was proving something bigger. That single mothers aren't helpless. That poor people can create something extraordinary. That what society throws away still has value.
How did you channel all that pressure into preparation?
I spent hours reviewing every building code, every regulation. I made lists of potential questions the inspector might ask. But honestly, the most important preparation was spiritual. I sat in what would become my baby's nursery and just prayed for strength to face whatever came next.
What gave you the courage to keep moving forward when the stakes felt so high?
I kept thinking about my child growing up in that house, Tony. About other mothers who might see my story and believe they could do something impossible too. The fear was still there, but it was smaller than the purpose driving me forward.
As that final inspection day approached, what did you tell yourself?
Quiet strength. I reminded myself that I'd already accomplished what everyone said was impossible. Whether they approved my house or not, I'd proven I could build something meaningful from nothing. That knowledge, that self-respect, nobody could take that away from me.
Sarah, we've reached that moment every builder dreads, the final inspection. But this wasn't just any inspection, was it?
Deep breath. No, Tony. This was make or break time. The city inspector was coming, and I knew there were people hoping I'd fail. 8.5 months pregnant, standing in front of a house made from what most folks called garbage.
What was going through your mind that morning?
Terror, honestly. Pure terror mixed with this strange peace. I'd spent the night walking through each room, touching the walls, whispering little prayers. The baby was kicking so hard, like she knew something big was happening.
Did you have support that day?
That's what surprised me most. My neighbor Mrs. Chen showed up at dawn with coffee. Then Jake arrived with his toolbox, checking every joint one more time. Even some of the folks who'd called me crazy were standing in my yard waiting.
How did you prepare for the inspection itself?
I had every receipt, every photo of the building process, every safety test result organized in 3 binders. Jake helped me rehearse answers to technical questions. But honestly, Tony, no amount of preparation could calm the voice in my head saying I was about to lose everything.
What gave you strength in those final hours?
I kept thinking about my grandmother's quilt. She made it from fabric scraps, old dresses, worn sheets, pieces everyone else threw away. But when she stitched them together with love and purpose, it became this beautiful, warm thing that lasted decades. That's what this house was. My grandmother's quilt made of metal and wood and sheer stubborn faith.
The inspector arrived right on schedule.
10 o'clock sharp. Middle-aged man with a clipboard and the most serious expression I'd ever seen. He didn't say a word to me at first, just started walking around the foundation, making notes. My heart was beating so loud I thought the whole neighborhood could hear it.
Did you follow him around?
Jake told me to stay put, let the work speak for itself. So I sat on my front steps, front cinder blocks at that point, with my hands on my belly, feeling the baby settle down like she was holding her breath too. Sometimes the hardest thing you can do is trust that you've done enough.
And then?
Then we waited for a verdict that would change everything.
Sarah, we've reached the moment everyone was waiting for. The house inspection. After months of building with recycled materials while pregnant, everything came down to that single day. Take me there.
Long pause, Tony. I remember standing in my kitchen that morning, watching the inspector's car pull up through my bathroom door window. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold my coffee cup.
What was going through your mind? This was make or break time.
Everything. If he failed me, I'd lose the house, lose custody of my kids, lose everything I'd fought for. People were already calling me the crazy pregnant lady who built a house from garbage.
Walk me through those first few minutes when he arrived.
He stepped out of his car looking skeptical, clipboard in hand, just shaking his head. I opened my front door and said, "Welcome to my trash palace." He didn't even smile, Tony.
That must have felt crushing.
It did. But then something shifted. He started examining my electrical work, my plumbing, the foundation. Room by room, his expression changed. He kept asking, "Where did you learn to do this? And how did you think of using this material here?"
What was the turning point?
When we reached the nursery, I'd built the crib from old fence posts and lined it with fabric from discarded curtains. He stopped writing and just stared. Then he said, "Ma'am, in 30 years of inspecting homes, I've never seen craftsmanship like this."
Sarah, that must have been an incredible moment.
I started crying right there. Not just relief, but vindication. Everyone who said I couldn't do it, everyone who called me foolish, they were all wrong.
What did he say when he finished?
He handed me the certificate and said, "This isn't just a house, it's a testament to human ingenuity." Then he asked if he could bring his students by to see what's possible when you think outside conventional construction.
From criticism to becoming a teaching example.
That's when I realized this was bigger than just proving people wrong. I'd created something that could inspire others facing impossible situations.
You transformed not just trash into treasure, but doubt into possibility.
Exactly, Tony. Sometimes the most beautiful things come from what others throw away.
Sarah, you're standing in front of your completed house, 9 months pregnant, and the whole town has gathered. What's going through your mind?
Long pause, honestly, Tony, I'm terrified. Not of giving birth, but of what I've started. There are reporters here, families asking me to help them build their own homes from reclaimed materials.
You never intended to become a movement leader.
I just wanted a roof over my baby's head. Now there's talk of a nonprofit, teaching workshops, changing building codes. Mrs. Henderson from the city council is here apologizing for calling me a public nuisance.
How does that feel?
Overwhelming. I spent months being the crazy pregnant lady digging through dumpsters. Now they're calling me visionary, innovative. But you know what the real miracle is?
Tell me.
My daughter will never know a world where people said she couldn't do something. She'll grow up believing that when everyone says you can't, that's exactly when you must.
Sarah, sitting here now, looking back at everything that's happened, what do you see when you think about that woman who started digging through dumpsters 8 months pregnant?
Soft laugh. I see someone who was absolutely terrified but refused to admit it. Someone who had no idea what she was capable of.
And what would you tell her now, if you could go back to that first day?
That the house she's about to build isn't really about the house at all. It's about discovering that, when everything falls apart, that's sometimes when you finally fall together.
The community that rallied around you, the movement that grew from your story, do you think that would have happened without the desperation?
No, Tony. Comfort doesn't create miracles. I had to lose everything to find out what I actually had inside me, and apparently what we all had inside us.
What remains now, when the cameras are gone and the story's been told?
A home built from love. And the knowledge that nothing is really trash until you stop believing in its potential.
Sarah, as we wrap up today, I have to ask, when you look back at that scared pregnant woman digging through dumpsters, what do you see now?
Long pause. I see someone who didn't know she was already enough. I thought I had to prove my worth by building something perfect. Turns out the building was just the beginning.
Your daughter Emma is 17 now. How does she view what happened?
She tells her friends her mom is the crazy lady who built a house from garbage. Laughs softly, but Tony, she also tells them that home isn't about the materials. It's about the love you pour into the foundation.
And the community that rallied around you?
Still here, still building. We've helped 43 families now. Each house different, each story unique.
Any regrets about that wild journey?
Only one. I wish I'd believed in myself sooner. Turns out, Tony, when the whole world says you'll never make it, sometimes that's exactly when you're about to surprise everyone, including yourself.
Sarah, thank you for sharing your remarkable story.